Are you ready? Well, get comfy, folks. It's story time.
When I was younger, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at 14. It was very difficult for me to socialise with people in person, so I turned to the internet. There I stumbled into the world of type-based roleplay. It became my passion and even set me on the path towards becoming the artist I am today. My original interest was Dragon Age, and I joined an RP group on DeviantArt, TMM. I loved that group, and I spent all my time in the Irk chat, which naturally led to a decline in my grades. But I met Michael after I gained a bit of interest in Slenderman. I had stumbled across the blog space RP world of Slender blogging and followed as many as I could, dedicated a Gmail to it and dived in, creating my own Slender blog. I played a character that was basically myself, even sharing my name. I would frequently post little videos of myself running through the woods, or even just talking to the camera. Michael was another player, and his character was on the enemy team. You see, I played what was known as a runner, or someone who was fleeing the Eldritch horror, and he was a proxy, which is a servant of the Slender Man. The kicker was that he was more than just a grunt, and was basically one of Slender Man's elite soldiers. Regardless, we ended up chatting over email, but he never broke character, so I didn't either. We continued to play with each other for over a year and a half before I ended up breaking character to another player, who was friends with Michael as well. He, of course, immediately told Michael, "Oh my god, she's not insane." And we had all kind of thought everyone else actually thought this stuff was real. So Michael messaged me excitedly announcing that I wasn't insane. We quickly became pretty close personal friends and referred to that moment as the best moment in RP history for most of the time we knew each other. We talked on an almost daily basis, and he always seemed to go out of his way to match my schedule, even though he lived 2 hours behind me. And I was a 15-year-old high school student by this point, so I was getting up at 5:30 every morning to go to school. He was pretty honest with his age, and being mature for my age, it didn't bother me that he was 19, almost 20, and I was 15. It was pretty close to the end of the year when we started talking out of character, so summer break came quickly. That just opened the door to us talking all the time. I remember one night he convinced me to stay up and video chat with him for the first time. I'd never actually seen his face before that, and I was ecstatic. I hid in my closet and we talked all night. My dad busted in at 4 in the morning and confiscated my computer, which I was not allowed to have in my room at night after that point. But I just ended up giving Michael my phone number and we grew closer. Later, while I was spending some time at a friend's house, I told him that I didn't think he was capable of surprising me, and he responded by asking me out. Being a 15-year-old girl, I was ecstatic but reluctant. My friend did well to ground me and think it through, and he'd been nothing if not a gentleman to me. So after a 45-minute walk with my friend, I called him and ecstatically told him yes. He had, during that time, sent me so many texts expressing concern that he'd upset me. I ended up apologising profusely for making him wait. The first few months were amazing. We were so close and talked every night on the phone, even sleeping while still in a call. I fortunately had unlimited text and call, but it got weird once the school year started back up. Over the summer, I'd been able to dedicate pretty much all of my time to him, and with school, it would limit the time we could talk to each other quite a bit. It didn't occur to me at all that talking to someone for near on 18 hours a day was an unhealthy dependency issue. So we had our first argument about texting. He wanted me to text him whenever I wasn't able to be in call with him, but I wasn't allowed to text in class. We came to a compromise when I told him that I would text him between classes and call him at lunch. I didn't really have any friends at that school, so as I was a bit of a recluse, and the ones I did have didn't share my lunch period, so it didn't affect my social life that much. It went well for a while, until I ran into an old friend from my middle school who happened to be a guy. I'd always gotten along better with guys than girls, but Michael freaked out. I had been on the phone when it happened and had brushed Michael off to talk to him. After my friend and I parted ways, I was harshly told off and told that I couldn't talk to other guys. I was completely shocked and tried to explain that the guy had been a friend of mine. Michael then had a complete breakdown and told me that his ex had cheated on him and that he couldn't trust any other guy to behave around me. He was terrified that I'd be stolen. He even cried. I was upset, but I agreed to mollify him and began to avoid all my male friends whenever I was on the phone, which was a lot. Quickly, schoolwork got pretty heavy, and it would take me longer and longer to call him after school. He began accusing me of not loving him enough to talk to him, and claimed that he never had enough time with me. He gave me the option of texting him in class or calling him as soon as I got home from school. I went with the latter, which completely cut off any time that I spent with my family, save for a brief dinner, after which I immediately returned to my room. Things only escalated from there. I would get held after class for falling asleep because he kept me up all night, and he would explode at me for not contacting him the moment the bell was scheduled to ring. He had a written copy of my exact schedule to the minute, and any deviation would freak him out. I began pushing away all my friends, as he didn't approve of any of them. He even claimed that a particular friend was the human personification of a demon that was trying to kill him. His mental state was revealed to be extremely fragile, and he told me that he had a second personality, who was quite literally his Slenderman character named Strider. Michael spoke frequently of this constant battle to keep Strider under the surface, because while he wasn't a bad person, he was irrevocably a major douchebag. He blamed his outbursts on this character, and even texted me in italics as for Strider, as if his body had been taken over for the sole purpose of belittling a 15-year-old girl over the phone. I was sympathetic, as my bipolar was at its worst, and my therapist was whispering the word schizoaffective to my mother when she thought I couldn't hear. For the next year and a half, he played me like a puppet, distancing me from my family and friends, convincing me that teachers only wanted to turn me into a mindless tool for the government, and persuading and coercing me into performing sexually for him. It felt disgusting, but he promised me that he'd marry me and would have beautiful children. He was frequently abusive, but he would quickly get better, and suddenly everything would be perfect again, until it deteriorated into another explosive argument. Eventually he convinced me to call CPS on my family and report them for abuse. Now, I won't claim that my family was perfect. My dad is an alcoholic, and he could get pretty violent, and he and I had vicious arguments. My mother mostly just supported whatever my dad did, and I was always incredibly resentful that she wouldn't defend me, even when my dad slapped me, kicked me out of the house barefoot, and was generally overly aggressive to me. But they did care, and my home was clean, warm, well stocked with food. My sisters and I never really wanted for much physically, and we often got things we wanted too. The system would have destroyed my sisters, who were pretty young at the time. When my parents found out that I had placed the call, I panicked and ran away from home, crashing at a friend's house. Michael wanted me to stay put until he could get a friend of his from Austin to come get me. But when I turned on my phone in the morning to see the texts from my family and knew that I had terrified my sisters and the police had been called, I arranged for my dad to bring me home. I wouldn't let him pick me up from my friend's house because I knew he had threatened to sue her parents for assisting a runaway. I served 6 months of juvenile probation and had to endure several meetings with a state-appointed therapist for falsely accusing my family of abuse, and my parents were subject to a second inquiry from CPS due to me running away. By the end, we were breaking up every other week and getting back together when he would send me pictures of terrible gouges in his arms, threatening to kill himself. I actively hated him by then, but still loved him and didn't want him to die. I escaped when he discovered that I had been talking to a male friend who he apparently hated and dumped me on Valentine's Day. It took him 2 months to realise I wasn't coming back, but he would still try to text me, and I blocked so many numbers and email accounts because he would change them just to message me. It was completely terrifying, and I was constantly terrified because he knew my address. But eventually he disappeared, and I slowly started trying to put my life back together. About a year or so ago, he texted me and I indulged him. He claimed that he'd been married. I really doubted it, despite the single picture that he sent. I asked what date his wedding had been on, but he couldn't tell me, and first tried to claim that it had been in December, 2 months before he dumped me. When I called him on it, he backpedaled and got defensive. I blocked him after that, satisfied that he was still a miserable mess, and that he hadn't snared another poor miner. So, Michael, let's not meet. For reference, I am female, and this happened when I was 20. So the first time I went out with my ex, we met for coffee, but I ended up paying, and I didn't mind at all, because he had lost his wallet. He was quite embarrassed and asked me if I would mind if we went back to his place to look for it. I naively said okay. He was older than me and lived in a crummy little place. Luckily for me, he was only interested in finding his rogue wallet, which he did, but his bank card was not in it. He never found that. After we'd been seeing each other for a few weeks and getting on great, he showed me his wang one day. I was not interested in seeing it, but he did so anyway. I had never seen one before and was shocked by the look of it. I told him to put it away and declared he was not coming anywhere near me with that thing. There was nothing wrong with his goods, it was just the suddenness of the display and the size. I was very vanilla, what can I say? When we reached the point of intimacy, there were times we spent the night together that I did not want to have sex. Instead of understanding, he pouted and said, "Didn't I love him?" Of course I insisted that I did, so he went on to say that I had to prove it, or else I was just lying. I wasn't going to do it on that basis, because I still did not want to. He said that meant I really didn't love him, and got upset. I didn't see the manipulation for what it was at the time, and eventually went along with what he wanted to prove it to him. Oh, how I wish I could go back in time and slap myself for being so stupid, and also him for being a dick. A couple of years later, yes, I stayed with him. He finally went all out and blatantly raped me. I will spare you the gory details, but suffice to say it was horrible and something that took me a long time to get over. Even then, I did not leave him. I asked him why he did it the next day, and he had nothing to say, merely angrily said that he did not want to talk about it, and that was that. Except it wasn't. He did it again the following week, and still I stayed. It was confusing for me, as we were in a relationship. I didn't really know why he did it, or understand that I could leave at any time. We were supposed to love each other. How could he do that to me if he loved me? It did not really occur to me at the time that I should go to the police, but I did try to tell my mum. We sat alone one day shortly after it happened, and I repeated in my head, "He raped me," over and over, but I could not get the words to come out of my mouth. I don't know what I actually said, but I had repeated those words so many times I later thought I had actually told her. We were together about 5 years in total. The final straw came when he slapped me when we were out in public one day. Just out of the blue, no reason at all. I'm not a violent or argumentative person. I know some people will try to say I must have invited it, but to you I say, no, shut up, you have no idea about anything. After it happened a second time, that's when I got scared. It did not hurt either time, I was just shocked. I began to wonder if this was how domestic violence began. Was it going to escalate? Well, I wasn't about to stick around and find out. That was when I finally walked. I told him I was going to stay with my parents for the weekend and never went back. I don't think I ever told my parents the full extent of what I went through, but they never liked him anyway, so it would have made no difference. That's all in the past now, so the less said about it, the better. So this happened in early July, and it still creeps me out. I'm a soldier and live in the barracks on base. Since I'm not married, I can't really afford my own place. For security reasons, I will not name the base or its location. It is typically pretty quiet around here, aside from the common parties that happen on the weekends, so this event was pretty surprising to me. Additionally, I work the night shift 4 days a week from 2 to midnight, so it is even quieter on most days when I return to my room. This night, however, was on the 4th of July weekend. Military gets a 4-day weekend on federal holidays, so the common area was a bit louder on Thursday night when I got back, my last work day for the week. To give you a better idea about the layout, the barracks are separated into 4 3-storey buildings that share a large concrete common area. Since we obviously can't smoke in our rooms, the common areas have 2 smoking areas, we call them smoke pits, on either side. The pits each consists of a picnic table, a grill, and a large trash bin covered by an awning to block out the rain. The pits are the site of most of the parties that occur on the weekends, mainly the one furthest from my building. I had gotten out of work early, so it was about 10 when I got to the barracks and made my way to my room. As per usual, on nights that don't have work days following them, there was a party at the pit furthest from my building, where most of the people outside were at. However, there was one person at my building's pit. Originally I assumed he was just out there to smoke and wasn't up for the partying. What was strange, however, was that he had no lit cigarette, no vape, and wasn't on his phone. He just sat there, dressed in blue jeans and a red hoodie with his hood up. It was the middle of July in the south, so this was a bit strange, but the rooms are pretty much perpetually cold during the summer. We don't control the AC, and the barracks NCOs just blast the shit on high, like at 65 degrees for the entire summer for whatever reason. So I figured he might have just stepped out to warm up. He sat on the table with his arms in his front pockets and his head hanging. Wanting to smoke, I stood at the opposite side of the table and lit a cigarette. The guy didn't speak or even move for the entire time I was there. He just sat there, blankly staring into his lap. I didn't think much of it and just made my way to my room, changed and just patrolled YouTube for a while. It's important to note a few things here. Each room houses 2 soldiers, and the doors automatically lock when closed. The only people with the key are the unit headquarters and the room's residents themselves. In the event a resident loses their key, they have to call to get someone to come and unlock it every time they need to get into the room until the key is replaced. Additionally, my room is located on the 2nd floor of the building and is a bit tucked away around the back, so unlike the rest of the building, there is next to no traffic outside my room. Lastly, my side of the room has the only window and is where the door is, so I can hear when someone rarely passes my room. Finally, my roommate worked an odd shift from 8 PM to 4 AM, and I wasn't too sure what days he worked. Also, the room is very dark, and I cannot see if my roommate is asleep in the room when I first enter. So I close the door quietly by keeping the knob turned as it closes. This is important. He wasn't home at this time. At around 2 AM, I hunkered down to get some sleep. Before I dozed off, however, I could hear a shuffling outside. I peeked out the window and could see some obviously inebriated girl tripping over herself to get to her room. I knew the girl lived in the room next to mine, so I didn't see a need to help her since she was literally right there, but I listened for a while until I heard her enter her room. About 10 minutes later, I heard someone walking towards my door and stop. I figured it was my roommate getting home, but I couldn't hear the obvious sound of someone unlocking the door. For a long moment it was silent. Then I heard the sound of my door slowly opening. Instantly I sat up and looked at the foot of my bed where the door was. There was no sound of the doorknob turning, no click of the lock. The door was just slowly being pushed open as if someone was trying to enter very quietly, which wasn't like my roommate. After the door was fully open, someone, not in uniform, walked in. At first I didn't recognise who it was until I noticed the red hoodie. I gasped and screamed, "Get the fuck out!" The man jumped and darted out of the room. I jumped out of bed and ran to the door. By the time I made it, the guy had jumped over the rail and onto the bushes below and was running across the common area. Immediately I called the MPs and they arrived within minutes. A few of them did a search of the area, while the rest made trips around the rooms to check on everyone. The girl's room next to mine was also not closed. They eventually found a guy in a storage room of another one of the barracks buildings. A few weeks passed until I found out the whole story. Apparently the guy wasn't even a soldier, but was an ex of the girl who lived next to me. Prior to that night, the ex didn't know what room she lived in, and had attempted to follow her to her room after she had finished partying. He knew she didn't have a roommate at the time, so he figured he'd be able to prey on her without anyone noticing. I don't know how the guy got onto base, since there's always ID checks at the gate, and the guy didn't even have identification on him. Fortunately for the girl, in my attempt to be quiet, I had accidentally not closed my door completely, and the guy mistook my room for hers. What's worse is the girl had not closed her door all the way either, so had the guy not mixed up the rooms, he'd have broken into hers while she was extremely drunk and lightly unconscious. While I'm fortunate that the girl was safe, I fear for what might have happened had I been asleep when the creep was in my room. Typically, the barracks are supposed to be safe places for troops to sleep, and things of this nature don't typically happen. But this goes to show you that you need to be careful no matter where you are. So, creepy civilian in the red hoodie, let's not meet again. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.